Boys, we got another TWAB this week, and yes, Arc Week is right around the corner. Bungie right here states that a storm is brewing. Next week, we'll kick off what we've been calling Arc Week. Our goal for this happening has been to take the element that makes our sandbox crackle and put it under a microscope. The most noticeable update is that we've improved many Arc subclass paths from the time before Forsaken. This week will also feature a Arc Singe and Arc bounties to synergize with your updated abilities. To provide a proving grounds for all this new energy, Mayhem will be available in the Crucible to let you experiment with your enhanced Arc abilities using shockingly short cooldowns. Arc Week will also feature one of the most powerful Arc weapons ever created, the Thunderlord exotic machine gun. If you weren't able to complete the quest to obtain Thunderlord last year, you will have from April 9th to April 23rd to revisit the Cosmodrome and add it to your collection. Now, Arc Week buffs up several Arc subclasses. Bungie states here that they're going to be focusing on Arc subclasses for the Titan, Hunter, and Warlocks to kick off Arc Week. That said though, we also made a couple needed changes to non-Arc abilities. So let's get into it. First up, boys, is the Striker class, Code of the Juggernaut, which is the bottom tree subclass. The notes here state that this path is all about punching enemies to get better at shooting them and shooting enemies to get better at punching them. We want to further incentivize engaging in this loop and make doing so more visible and flashy. Shooting an enemy should make you feel like you are primed to strike with melee. Punching an enemy and releasing your rage will make you feel like a more focused shot. Alright, okay Bungie, let's talk about these buffs. First up, Frontal Assault now increases all weapon damage for the duration of the buff. This is a 25% buff against combatants and a 20% buff against players. The duration has also been increased from 10 seconds to 16, and the buff timer is now being displayed on the HUD. Okay guys, so Frontal Assault, if you remember, it's the melee ability found on Bottom Tree Striker. Essentially what it does now is when you actually hit an enemy with this melee ability, you automatically reload your weapon and increase weapon stability. But notice here, there is no buff to our weapon damage. They kind of took the same route as they did with Bottom Tree Sunbreaker and Sun Warrior. It'll be interesting to see how much damage that buff actually is going to be. Now, moving on to the other perk found on Bottom Tree Striker, Knockout. Melee damage bonus is now increased from 25% to 60%. Wow. It now also triggers once you have dealt 60% damage to a target. Any damage done after the 60% though will refresh the timer. Now the perk itself will still trigger off of shield pops. It's no longer consumed after one melee attack, and the duration has now been increased from 3 seconds to 5 seconds. Now let's go over this perk. Currently right now, Knockout states that critically wounding an enemy or breaking their shields increase your melee range and damage. Now what we got here from what they said in these patch notes that are coming with 2.2.1 is they're not doing anything to the range of which this melee can go off at. Meaning you could still have potentially Synthecept range with this melee, but of course now you're going to get a very large buff there in total melee damage bonus. But the two biggest things here is the fact that any damage done after the 60% will refresh that knockout timer, meaning chaining melee kills to different opponents is going to be much easier. Guys, I'm looking forward to this. As someone who runs Bottom Tree Striker a bunch, that neutral game was the original selling point here, and so to see these buffs, I'm looking forward to it. Arc Strider, Way of the Warrior, top path. This path thrives on striking with precision and timing and is heavily melee focused. To enhance this loop, we are giving it a bit more nuance with a higher potential payout. We want to allow for more room to execute and engage with both the path to success and the benefits once you do succeed. So first up, Combination Blow. Bonus melee damage can now be stacked 3 times, requiring a melee ability kill for each stack. Buff increased the melee damage by 60% per stack in PvE. Buff increased melee damage by 22.7% per stack in PvP. For comparison, this ability used to be a 1 stack and increased melee damage by 50%. Kills with this ability now heal 40 health in addition to starting health regeneration. Okay, so if I'm getting this right, guys, Combination Blow, at least for PvP, in terms of its stacking damage and buffs, it's going to be slightly less on the bottom end because you don't get that immediate get 50% buff in increased melee damage, but will increase at 3 stacks all the way up to 68%. Now this may not be nasty all on its own, but obviously when combining this with Liar's Handshake, it should be pretty nasty. Now when we read from the perk itself here, it states that kill an enemy with his melee ability to trigger health regeneration, and of course increase your melee damage temporarily. But now, after 2.2.1 goes live, you're gonna get 40 health back immediately, but also simultaneously get health regeneration going, which is probably gonna be the biggest selling point here. Now I know we're kind of focused on PvP. Do not overlook the fact that we're now about to get a 60% buff per stack of melee damage inside of PvE. Good God. I'm sure this can be a very nasty combo when paired with something like 1-2 punch. Might take some time to get the right setup, but man, nearly 200% increase in damage and then proceeding to activate the trait 1-2 punch. Good lord. Now moving on to another perk found on the subclass, Deadly Reach. Increased buff duration from 6 seconds to 8 seconds. Buff is no longer consumed by a melee hit. So when we actually take a look at the Arc Strider top treat perk here, Deadly Reach, dodging increases your melee range, allowing you to lunge further to strike enemies. So now you're going to get an increase in that buff duration in which you can activate Deadly Reach. And considering now that the buff won't be consumed by a melee hit, again, for my hunters that don't have Liar's Handshake, get it now. Moving on to Arc Strider Way of the Wind. This is the bottom path. This path is about quick movement and thriving under pressure. We want to increase your ability to survive while at low health and enhance your elusiveness so you can be more confident when in danger. This way, you don't just get a bonus when you're injured. You have more control over what state you're in, and you can make more risk-reward choices. So first up, guys, the perk here, Disorienting Blow. Increase the disorient distance by 50%. Increase duration of disorient on players from 1.5 to 2 seconds. Okay, so let's go over that perk real quick. For those that don't know, Disorient Blow is when you strike an enemy with this melee ability, you disorient your target and also nearby enemies. So again, that 50% increase there in disorient distance, I'm assuming that means like the radius of which enemies are around the target that you melee. So it should have a bigger radius for that disorient, as well as the duration there being increased from 1.5 to 2 seconds. Now, Focus Breathing. Increase dodge recharge bonus while sprinting by 100%. That is huge. Currently right now, guys, Focus Breathing is when you're actually sprinting, it recharges your dodge ability. Giving it a 100% buff there is going to be ginormous. On top of that, remember, Focus Breathing also gives you your maximum sprint speed on Arc Strider. I don't really know how much that is. Y'all let me know. My Hunter mains, let me know. Is it noticeable? I don't play Hunter enough. Combat Meditation. Increase bonus grenade and melee regeneration while bloodied by 25%. Okay. Again, this perk states while critically wounded or like in the red zone there for your health, your melee and grenades recharge drastically faster. Super fast, or so it used to be. Now that's actually going to be even faster as it's getting a 25% buff in its regeneration. Now, Lightning Reflexes. Increase damage resistance while dodging from 25% to 40% in PvP. Increase damage resistance while dodging from 63% to 70% in PvE. So you can pretty much infinitely dodge on this subclass when you're in your super. I don't think it consumes any part of your super. You're already super hard to kill while dodging on this subclass, but now you're about to get an increase in damage resistance as well from 25 to 40%. Holy crap. We're gonna have some things to say after today's TWAB, boys, because we need to talk. Moving on, though, to the Stormcaller Stormtrance Super top and bottom paths. Damage scales up to 150% over 5 seconds of continuous use of the attack. They also updated the FX and audio to support this functionality. Okay, so essentially they're just upping the damage by a whopping 150%, but only after 5 seconds of continuous tickle finger action. You're sitting there burning your lightning into an enemy. After 5 seconds is when you actually start seeing some nasty. Now moving on to the Stormcaller Attunement of Conduction. This is the top path. The notes here state that this path focuses prominently on chain lightning, but we also wanted to better sell the fantasy of being a god of erratic and dangerous energy. We want you to be delighted and surprised by the chaos you cause. On top of that, we should make the choice of using your abilities somewhat to better strategize around and reward you for doing so. Chain Lightning Melee can now chain up to 5 times, up from 1, and each individual target can be hit twice. What? Hold on, we're gonna have to go over this in just a second. Chain damage has now actually been decreased from 50 to 31 damage per chain hit. Okay, so when we take a look at the perk here found on Stormcaller, it states that this electrocuting melee ability hits at extended range and chains lightning from the struck target to nearby enemies. Now it's going to be able to chain up to 5 times. Now, I guess if it's dependent on how many enemies are in proximity of each other, will depend on how much it actually chains. Again, we're going to need to do some testing there. That's pretty interesting though. Now, Arc Web can now chain to many more targets and back and forth between the targets. The amount of chaining varies based on use, and I would leave it to you all to discover. They've also increased chain range from 10 meters to 12 meters. Sounds about right. Chaining art damage now reduces the cooldown of your grenade. Works with arc web chains and chains from chain lightning melee. Wow, so it's actually going to work with both. You also earn 3% energy per instance of chain damage in PvE, while you earn 10% energy per instance of chain damage in PvP. So just our chain lightning melee here could actually give you up to 50% of your grenade back when chaining this lightning damage. And we're not even including what arc web and your arc grenades can do. For those that don't know, arc web, a perk that was also back in Destiny 1, is a perk that states that enemies damaged by your grenades chain deadly lightning to nearby enemies. So again, this is just going to chain more of that energy on top of whatever buffs we're probably going to be getting, since they're kind of just leaving this open-ended for us. Now, moving on to the Stormcaller Attunement of Elements. This is the bottom path. The notes here states that currently this path focuses on creating drone buddies for allies and staying close to them to dish out more rifts and the buddies therein. Generally, our drone is short-lived, and you need to stay close to your rift to keep it around. Now you will be able to take your POW further, and if you stick with your friends, we'll be able to have it around much more often, making this path more potent as support. So the first perk here that's going to be getting a buff, Electrostatic Surge. Increased bonus regeneration rate of rifts by 600% per nearby friendly guardian. What? Per? Now they're going to say that this sounds insane, and it's a big boost you will definitely feel, but it was previously very low. Still, Jesus. Extends rift duration from 15 to 20 seconds. Oh, that's neat. And added a UI notification for when the buff is active. So if we look at Electrostatic Surge right now, guys, it just simply states that your rift charges faster when allies are near. I don't believe it was a really noticeable buff, but after this update, it should be pretty noticeable. Now, Arc Souls extended the duration by 50%. Okay, so of course, when you pop your rift on bottom tree there, your rift will grant you and your allies an Arc Soul to aid you in battle. I can't remember what the duration is. Is it 6 seconds? Whatever the case, it's getting a 50% buff there in duration, which really has me wondering how this is going to affect the new exotic Warlock gauntlets that gives us that 20-second arc buddy when popping our grenade. I wonder if that has any bearing or effect at all on Arc Soul. We'll have to check it out. Now, moving on to the non-arc changes. Voidwalker, the Nova Warp Super. Notes, clearly we swung a bit hard when we hit this previously. This should serve as a nice middle ground to settle into. They reduce the initial charge detonation energy cost by 20%. They reduce energy cost of holding the charge detonation by 7%. Reduce time required to fully charge the charge detonation from 0.9 seconds to 0.7 seconds. They also reduce Dark Blink cost by 20%. Holy crap. Increase base super duration from 18 seconds to 22 seconds. All right. I think that's more than fair. We'll have to just see though. Dawnblade, Everlasting Fire perk. Now the notes here states that similar to the Striker, we want to make sure this perk didn't allow for infinite supers in certain activities. We've increased the amount you get back up front, but put diminishing returns on it so you can't go forever. This will still be a super you can extend much longer with skill. So they tuned the amount of super gain from Everlasting Fire. The initial return increased from 10% to 13% super energy. And they state here that the return then decays linearly over the course of 30 kills from 13% to 0.75% return per kill. So for my Dawnblade users out there, you're getting the same treatment that us bottom tree strikers got. Now, it states you may be asking, what about Spectral Blades? Bungie states here, we know it's out of bounds and are working right now on a few tweaks to bring it back in line. We'll let you know the details once we finish playtesting and tuning to lock in on what the changes will be. So there you go, guys. Got a lot of buffs coming here. I don't know how I feel about it. You know, I'm excited because a lot of these buffs are not necessarily like buffing the supers themselves. It's more or less buffing the neutral game or what it is that the supers and subclasses are trying to utilize best, which I'm all for that. That just adds more to the synergy, and it just adds a lot more depth to certain builds that we want to try. But I have to say, supers inside of the Crucible are getting a little too out of hand. Bungie is definitely like buffing this power fantasy, and by no means do I want any of that to be toned down in PvE. But I do believe there needs to be a more effective way to counter these supers inside of Crucible outside of having a super, because you start seeing these teams get on these super trains, and before you know it, there's nothing you can do. So again, I'm a huge fan of these buffs because again, they're more focused on what these subclasses are trying to do in terms of synergy. But I want to see something done to where a shotgun melee combo inside of Crucible can take down a super, where a crit shot from a sniper, adaptive impact or higher can one-shot kill a super. For the most part, when people pop their supers inside of Crucible, they fear nothing. They walk around a corner, head level. They don't even care what's looking at them, which is not good, because in all aspects of this game, I think you need to be playing strategically, even when you're in your super. Now, moving on, we've also got a patch note preview of update 2.2.1, which again, guys, is rolling out next Tuesday. We're finally getting those exotic catalysts, man. Thank God. We've got 4 new exotic weapon catalysts coming, and they will be available to drop in Nightfall, Strikes, and in Crucible. We've got the Prospector, the Rat King, Hard Light, and Surus Regime Catalysts all coming to us next week. Now, I don't really know how much these catalysts have changed since the last time we looked at them. We did see them in the database. Previously, what we saw from, like, say, Prospector, we were supposed to get a catalyst that increases our blast radius, as well as the weapon size, and the perk, of course, Deeper Pockets, which increases our ammo reserves. The exotic catalyst for Surus Regime was going to give us a 50 recoil direction buff, which should make the weapon completely vertical, on top of giving us a buff there to the Surus Legacy perk, allowing for that health regeneration to activate more often. Now, the Rat King catalyst was like, upon getting a kill and reloading, when going invisible, you simultaneously start health regeneration. Our insurmountable King build is going to be nasty. Now, Hard Light, at least from what we saw in the database, was nothing special, as that one only gave us a plus 25 there in stability, which really blows my mind, as this thing already has 82 stability and it's going to max out at 100 to begin with. Just give me an exotic catalyst that stops the screen shake with this weapon. Now, moving on, they're also going to be fixing Warlock Bloom ability. They fixed an issue where the Bloom ability would not deal damage. Yeah, somebody called me out about that a few weeks ago. It was working like, I don't know, 4 or 5 months ago when we did some builds. I guess somewhere in that process of sandboxes rolling out, Bloom must have messed up. Now, Xur's inventory will now offer random roll perks for armor. Oh, okay then. I need Dune Marchers right now with traction, Xur. Infusion. They're also fixing an issue where the Vow could not be infused above 650. Fixed an issue where Braid Tech RWP MK2 could not be infused above 600. Damn it, I thought this was going to actually talk about infusion and removing it. I guess not. Gambit Prime weapons. Most Gambit Prime weapons will now have a chance to drop as match completion rewards from Gambit Prime. Good, because they are elusive. Increasing drop rates for Gambit Prime weapons from the Reckoning. Both Gambit Prime and Reckoning will have increased drop rates for weapons after each completion without a drop until players are guaranteed a reward. All right then. Gambit Prime. An invasion kill will heal 8% of the Primeval's health, down from 12%. The invasion portal cooldown time during the primeval phase will be increased to 40 seconds, up from 30 seconds. This cooldown triggers after a player has been killed or successfully returns from an invasion. Gambit Prime will now count to unlock the weekly Gambit Clan Ingram. Now, this is what time everything's going to be rolling out next Tuesday, guys. Other than that, that's pretty much our TWAB. We've got a lot of stuff coming. I'm sure we're going to get more in terms of patch notes next Tuesday. As far as the state of Crucible, I normally make one of those videos, like once every quarter, talk about the state of Crucible, talk about the state of the game too, but it's about that time. We've got some things to say, so be looking out for that video because we need to talk about this sandbox, why sandbox updates are taking so long to roll out, what is the deal with 180 round per minute hand cannons, are supers really too strong, how do we fix it, should Spectral Blades receive the Blade Dancer treatment, a lot of things we need to talk about, guys. So I'll see you all in the next one. Fellas and ladies, thank you all for coming and watching, and as always,
slap that like button like your mama told you right.